I really want to thank everyone who made today possible. It takes a lot to make this happen. And these aren't organizations that don't have other things to do, okay? With HAC, with the Chamber, with the Realtors, with the home builders, with Cape Built. That's it for now. A tremendous amount of work made today happen, and it's tremendously encouraging. And I think I'm going to talk about some of the tough things that we face and we're up against, but to get this many people in the room, and where we have so much promise on this, is there is agreement on this issue among the political leaders, among the institutions and organizations and businesses and nonprofits here in the region. We're not arguing about this issue. We've got some disagreements with our municipalities. We've got some disagreements with certain folks who are on various boards who've probably been there for too long. But the consensus in the room today and the work that made today happen, I'm very grateful for. I would also be remiss if I did not give a shout out to the folks from the Islanders. We have Islanders here from Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. We also have folks here from the Outer Cape. As someone who lives in the Outer Cape, as someone who was just on Nantucket yesterday, who was on Martha's Vineyard last week, it takes a lot to be here. But I think as a region, we are really stronger, and I think can really learn from those of us who live in the extremities in the region. We are the canaries in the coal mine here. And so I'm just grateful for your attendance. And I'm so thankful for this incredible legislative delegation that I have the honor to work with. Representative Diggs is here. Representative Fernandez has been the fiercest of voices on this. I'm really grateful for Tim Whalen and Steve Exaros and Dave Vieira, and especially Representative Sarah Peake, who was talking about and working on zoning reform long before this was sort of an urgent, sexy issue. So I will not rehash. I'm going to talk a little personally. I'm not going to rehash sort of all the data that y'all heard, but I do want to talk about this idea that I've had, right? Because I'm in the business of political organizing, right? That's how you get to be a 30-year-old state senator from the smallest town in Cape Cod. I'm not in the 81% in this room, right? I'm not a homeowner. I rent. I've dealt with the shuffle. I've dealt with losing an apartment because the owner wanted to rent it out for the summer for an obscene amount of money. Basically, my housing plan at this point is essentially to get a boyfriend, to have double income. Much to my mother's chagrin, it's not working out yet. But look, I'm going to be fine, right? But it should cause alarm bells when millennials and Generation Z, right, that we can't make it here. And we're not just talking about the people who work at Latham Center or in our nursing homes, or people who are doing very important work, but work that is, could be compensated a lot more, right? We're talking about well-paid professionals, healthcare providers in our hospitals, the people who run our organizations and our institutions, right? The person who represents more people in the region than anyone else at the state level, right? And if you do own a home, I don't think you realize how profoundly steep this challenge is. I think people are beginning to realize it. So when I first ran in 2016, you needed about $98,000 in income to qualify for a mortgage for the median home on Cape Cod. And in under 6 years, that's now over $188,000 of the income that you need. And that's before we factored in the recent inflation and increase in interest rates. To hear that housing costs, it's not a surprise to me as someone who was looking at housing and who essentially sort of surrendered for the moment. Housing costs have doubled in the last 24 months. That is terrifying for the viability of our region, and that we are, in effect, because of the policies, and these are affirmative policies, right? This isn't just us sitting back and saying we're not going to do nothing. We've made very specific choices in our community that prioritize the preservation of wealth of those of us in our community who are fortunate to have either been born here or bought here in a generation before. And we've prioritized their wealth preservation at the erosion of who's going to be able to make it here. And that we're eroding our communities a heck of a lot faster than what's happening with rising seas and with the climate crisis. And this is going to get real. This is already serious. This is a problem that's been building for 20 years. But really, I think in the pandemic, we just put the problem on steroids. And so now, we're at an inflection point. And if we don't dramatically change course, this is just not simply going to be a sustainable year-round place. That's certainly the case in the extremities of the region, in my neck of the woods, and that's going to be more and more the case here. And you heard that from the employers across all the sectors that we have. You hear that in our schools, in our fire, in our police. Pick the service, pick the need, and it's not going to be here. It's not going to be here because there's not going to be people to do that work. I cannot stress how strongly housing is my number one priority. So much so, I think some of you may have received a little bit of propaganda in the mail. It's a picture of me. It says Julian Cyr's number one priority is housing. I trespassed on Rob Brennan's one of his properties and took some cute pictures on a hot day, right? But this is something we've been laser focused on, and I want to talk about some of the work that we've done because I want folks to understand what is our role in Beacon Hill and what is your role. So in appropriations, we have been doing quite a bit. I partnered with Senator Julian Cyr, who is also a tremendous partner, and we secured $3.5 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds to bring resources to municipalities, resources to organizations, including $500,000 for no-interest loans and assistance with the construction of accessory dwelling units, another $500,000 to expand rental subsidy and financial coaching to early educators and human service professionals, the folks you heard about that we're so struggling to recruit. $250,000 to the Cape Cod Commission to identify properties across Barnstable County that could be developed into housing. Millions of dollars to finish other projects. $250,000 that is helping to convene groups like this today. And that was paired with tremendous work in the House, $1.3 million secured in housing. This is just in this year. This is big money. This is the largest sum of money that's come via these sort of local priorities that we've seen in a generation. Sorry, I keep on screwing this up. Including Representative Sarah Peaks securing $1 million for housing in the Lower and Outer Cape, and Representative Fernandez securing $300,000 for a housing initiative on Martha's Vineyard. And there's more to come. Just now, in a matter of moments or hours, the Senate and House will be voting on a reconciled economic development package that took a little longer to get done than I would have liked. But in this package, it's a multi-billion-dollar package. In this package, $409.5 million is dedicated to housing, including $100,000 for the Commonwealth Builders Programs, $100,000 for the Affordable Housing Trust, $100,000 for workforce housing. This is good, big stuff. We also have been laser focused on providing the infrastructure that we need to, yes, support the housing that we have here and also deal with another crisis that we have in the region, which is a $4 billion wastewater problem. And really the development of how this place was developed, right? With all these single homes, truly as an ecological disaster, right? If you're building a 1 acre, a home on a 1 acre lot, half an acre lot with a Title V septic system, that is what has caused the obscene level of nitrogen that we have in our embayments, the level of phosphorus in our freshwater estuaries. This is a solution that when I came in, and probably arguably one of the biggest things that this delegation will get done for a generation was the creation of the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund. And this was using a 2.75% surcharge on local occupancy. We used the short-term rental bill as a vehicle to get this done. It is a huge, huge deal. I don't know if the realtors supported it at the time, but I'm thrilled they're bragging about it now. Just have to tease Ryan. But this fund already, the fund's only been in existence for like 2 years, and the Cape Cod Commission's been doing fabulous work on this. $31 million in direct subsidy coming for wastewater and water quality and sewer projects in the region in the first 2 years. That is other people's money that is not coming out of your property taxes. It is the game changer in implementing the 208 plan. And it's saying to the towns, hey, look, the Commonwealth has skin in the game here. We're going to bring in probably $1 billion of revenue in the life of this fund. And that's probably the biggest infrastructure piece, right, that we can do for housing. We've also been supporting a number of other initiatives. You heard about the housing choice efforts, which I think have made some difference. They've actually made more difference than I thought they would. I really pushed for a number of other zoning changes. I'm working very hard to establish the local option for municipalities to use a transfer fee on luxury real estate. Maybe something Ryan and I don't fully agree on, but basically giving municipalities the tool to capture revenue from our luxury housing market to fund workforce and affordable housing. This is a home rule petition started on Nantucket, Provincetown, Truro, Chatham. All 6 towns in Martha's Vineyard have followed suit. So has Somerville, Cambridge, Boston, a few other municipalities. This is something we're really trying to move on. I talk about all that we're doing on Beacon Hill because that is the extent of what we can do on Beacon Hill. And I want to be clear, we cannot fix this problem on Beacon Hill. This is not a problem that I can solve, that Sarah Peak, that Kip, that all of us in this legislative delegation can solve for Cape Cod. For better or for worse, and maybe we've talked and learned a little bit today about why this is for worse, the hyper-local control of land use and housing in our communities has led to the consequence that we have today, which is effectively a community where most of the working people can't make it or won't be able to make it if they don't have that home. Now, there's a lot of conversation about this, and I'm really optimistic that we're going to push the envelope on what we can do on Beacon Hill. If you listen to what the likely new administration is talking about, what's the number one issue Maura Healey and Kim Trist are talking about? It's housing. And maybe we're going to claw back some of that local authority. If you look at what California's done, right? California's basically said, hey, look, y'all have had control at a local level of land use and housing for decades. And it's truly only served to have classist and racist consequences. And by the way, we haven't done that good of a job preserving our environment while we've had that local control. That conversation is going to happen and percolate. I don't think it's going to happen this session. It's probably not going to happen the next session, but that's maybe where we're going in the state. But from a Cape Cod perspective, we don't have another session or 2 sessions or 5, 6, 10 years, right? The crisis that we've got, we're in it. We're here. We've been in it. And so I want to really stress that we can't solve this problem for us. But I want to tell you how we do fix this problem. And it starts and goes through all of you. So let me tell you how we fix this. I think for those of you who know me, and especially from the Lower Cape and Outer Cape, I'm an organizer. The first thing I ever did as an organizer, as an activist, was when I was a junior in high school. We had pretty big budget cuts in the Nauset School District, pretty significant gap. If we didn't get the voters at town meeting to pass Proposition 2.5 overrides, they'd eliminate 40 teaching positions and staff. There's a very cute saccharine story about my efforts with a lot of people who are in my life and a lot of students to say, hey, wait a minute, we don't want to lose our choir teacher. We don't want to lose these programs. So we're going to go to the voters in the 4 member towns in Nauset, and we're going to convey and tell them what will be lost. We're going to tell our stories, and hopefully maybe with a little shameless choir performances and other sort of tactics, we're going to convince the taxpayers to pass that override. And we were successful. And I tell that story not to, brag about my very dorky, weird youth in high school, but I tell it because that's how we get things done in our communities. And that there's such a tremendous power that each of us have, particularly at the local level. 14 out of the 15 towns here are town meeting, form of government. You can just show up. I believe aside from Falmouth, this is open town meeting. And in Barnstable, you got a town council, right? But we've got a tremendous amount of say in what happens at the local level in our communities. And a big part of the problem is not just who is showing up, but who's not showing up. And a lot of us aren't showing up. I see the elected officials at the municipal level nodding their heads, right? And we've got to figure out a way to show up. And it's hard to show up. Look, okay, going to, you're a working person raising a family. Probably the last thing you maybe want to do is sit through a municipal meeting at the end of your day. Maybe it's a little more palatable on Zoom, right? But this is the work that we've got to do. We've got to build a political movement. We've got to build a campaign. We've got to get super grassroots. What's promising here is the politics are in many ways the opportunity for change is actually pretty big. And you can see this in the extremities in the region. You see this on Nantucket and you see this in Provincetown. A decade ago, Provincetown and Nantucket were dragging their feet on a lot of housing issues. We're not doing enough. What's changed is the level of the crisis, the fact that new people got involved, that the people who've been fighting for this work, right, the housing advocates and so forth, were bolstered with reinforcements. And now, you heard a Provincetown Select Board member mention passing a slew of very pro-housing policies that would be considered radical in a town in the Mid-Cape. Doing that, maybe a little debate, but with overwhelming supermajorities. On Nantucket, the number one priority, universal in the town, is on housing, and they have appropriated tens of millions of dollars for this. And it's because they've gotten organized and because who has showed up has changed. And that's happened it's happening on Martha's Vineyard with a housing bank. It's happening in towns across the region. But we've got to build a political movement town by town. So how do we do that? One, I think we really got to spend some time on learning how we tell our stories and really figuring out some good messaging. So if you're running a political campaign, one of the things you really got to do is figure out how are you going to talk to people? How are you going to tell those stories? Who shows up? Whose faces are on, these sort of things matter. And so I really want and would like to see and I'm really game for helping to figure out what does that message look like? What is the most powerful, relatable way to talk about the housing crisis? Is it housing to protect Cape Cod? Is it, as verbiage, right? Is it, you're not going to be able to get help in your home when you're sick? Is it a myriad of ways that we could talk about this, right? But we've got to refine our language. We have to get our messaging in a way that we can break through the sort of traditional knee-jerk concerns that get a lot of folks to say to a very common sense project like you saw Ryan show on the screens, right? That 5-unit, very lovely, lovely looking building. How do you break through that? That's an important piece of this. I think 2, we need to really begin to organize and to get people to show up at town meeting. Yes, to support issues when we have them. When we have a town that is moving forward pro-housing policies, housing production policies, housing preservation policies, that we show up and we make sure this isn't a nail biter, that we're not squeaking through with just 50%, but we're winning overwhelmingly. And that takes grassroots organizing, neighbor to neighbor, that interpersonal organizing that gives the person who's struggling to figure out how they're going to pay rent and afford childcare a reason to give up their Saturday or their Tuesday night to show up at town meeting. We also need to support the people who are doing this work. And if you serve at a municipal level, and we got a lot of these folks here today, I'm really grateful for you being here. This is a hard job, okay? When you're the state senator or the state rep, you're in a big government, you're part of a lot of other folks that you're working with. But I like to call it like the getting yelled at the dump factor, or the getting yelled at the post office factor, right? There is a level of accountability when you serve on your select board, on your planning board, on your zoning board. This is the reason why my parents, despite multiple pleas from me and my sister, don't want to serve, right? They don't want to serve on the Truro Planning Board because they don't want to get yelled at the dump. They don't want to deal with a bunch of other people they don't, they're kind of intimidated by. And we've got to support the people who are serving and show up and show political power that when they take a strong stance on housing production, that we're going to have their backs, that we're going to show up and show that a majority of people in the communities support these policies. Because my hunch from being all around this region is that a majority of people here do support housing production policies, do want to see change on housing. When we did a poll for my campaign, number one issue, housing. The problem is who's showing up. How do we give that political support? How do we talk about this issue in a way that's going to relate to most people in our community? And I think in some cases, we've got to force the issue, right? The town of Truro has been dragging its feet. I love Truro, but I'm going to pick on Truro because it's my hometown. And that way I get in the least amount of trouble. Right? The town of Truro's been dragging its feet. Now, we forced an article related to changing the makeup of the planning board in Truro at town meeting. I was very frustrated when we lost that vote by 1 vote. So you got to learn how to count, which Ryan talked about. But we've got to force the issue as well. And to do all of this, we have to build a political movement that is bigger than the organizations who convened this meeting today, that is bigger than the people in this room. And we need to think big. This is what Sarah Peake, whispered to me, whispered to Elisa when we were at the table early this morning. We need to think big. I agree, 10% is insufficient, completely insufficient. And if you look again, Nantucket, Provincetown are on the cusp of being at 10% affordable. They're going to be, they'll be in safe harbor. They won't be subject to 40B. Their problem is not solved. If anything, the problem has become more and more acute. And so you can count on me to be an unwavering partner on this issue. And I'm going to try to find every single state policy that we can pass, every appropriation we can muster to bring resources and policy to bear on this issue. But a lot of this is going to have to be changing our local zoning, figuring out who we're getting to make sure that the people who are serving, yes, on our select boards and town councils, but also on our zoning board of appeals and also our planning boards, understand what needs to happen here. And what makes me encouraged as someone who is an unrepentant environmentalist and who's very proud of my environmental record, that actually we can have housing production here on Cape Cod that actually reduces our environmental impact, particularly as it relates to nitrogen, and solves our problem. This is not a zero-sum game. This is not asking to meet the moment of a clean energy future or choose that we're going to house people. We can do all this together. So, this is what I'd really like folks to think about. I want to be very honest. These entities can't do it alone. And in many ways, we need HAC and the chamber and the home builders and the realtors and the folks who put this together. They've got important big jobs to do, right? And in some cases, we need them really focused on helping people get, actually find that housing, right? An unprecedented number of people who need that housing, right? We need to have the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce, continuing to be a real leader in the region as a policy thinker. You don't often hear, right, the progressive state senator of a region talking about how the Chamber of Commerce in the area is the essential partner, right? So we're going to need to grow this thing. We're probably going to need to create something that is separate and apart from these entities. And so that's what I want folks to be thinking about. And I want you to be thinking about, how do you build a campaign? And how do you build a campaign? It starts with people. You learn to tell your stories. How do you tell your story? How do you make it personal? You harness the resources, the money, right? It's going to take to do this kind of stuff. And you begin to build a grassroots, people-powered movement that makes tangible and increasingly rapid change at the local level. And I actually think if we're able to do this, I think there's real agreement and real understanding in our communities about this issue, because people are living it every day. And if you're not housing insecure, you've got a daughter or a son or a niece who is, or the home health aide, or the person who helps a loved one at a nursing home, or provides assistance to a loved one with a developmental disability, or on and on and on. The people who serve us each and every day, you know those people. They're not going to be able to be here and make it here and stay on here. They're leaving here if we don't change course. And I think what's so exciting is they've got a room full, and not just a room full, we've got like a bulging group of people here, right? Who care about this issue so much that you gave up about 3-4 hours of your day, plus driving time, to be here. And I look around the room and I see people, so many people who are talking about this issue, who are moving forward on this issue, who are doing work in their own communities. And I really challenge us to think, how do we do this smarter? How do we truly build the political movement we need at the local level to make this happen? And I actually think we can do it. I actually think, look, this is hard, but this isn't insurmountable. It just depends, do we have the will to get this done? And do we have the tenacity and the strength and the numbers to really change the game here? And if we do, and if we can, I promise that I will be a partner, and this legislative delegation will be a partner to each and every one of you in this whole movement in really changing the conversation about housing on the Cape and Islands, and actually making sure that we build and preserve the housing we need to have a sustainable future. So I'm really grateful for your time this morning, for being here, for showing up. I really want to ask you to continue to show up and to support these efforts. And I'm so excited to continue to be a part of this with all of you. So thank you so much.